You're sitting across from someone you care about. They just said something that hurt you. Your chest tightens. Your mind races through 100 responses. But instead of speaking up, you smile and say it's fine. You change the subject. You swallow the words you really want to say. Later that night, you replay the conversation in your head. You imagine what you should have said. You feel that familiar knot of resentment growing tighter, and you wonder why you keep doing this to yourself. Sound familiar? Here's what's happening. Every time you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you're trading away a piece of your freedom. Not your freedom in some abstract sense, your actual freedom to be yourself, to have authentic relationships, to make choices that reflect who you really are. Here's a statistic that might surprise you. According to research from psychologist Madeline at St. Louis University, conflict avoidance is associated with psychological distress levels comparable to those who experience frequent conflict. In a study of over 1,400 adults, both the high conflict group and the high conflict avoidance group reported significantly more distress than those who engaged in healthy conflict resolution. You're not alone in this pattern. Most of us have learned to view conflict as something dangerous, something to escape. But what if I told you that by avoiding conflict, you're not protecting yourself at all? What if you're actually building invisible walls that keep you trapped, disconnected, and fundamentally unfree? In today's video, we'll explore 4 hidden ways conflict avoidance is stealing your freedom. First, we'll break down the surprising mechanisms that keep you silent, even when it matters most. Then, we'll uncover the evolutionary and neurological reasons why your brain treats disagreement like a physical threat. But most importantly, we'll walk through 6 practical strategies backed by psychological research that you can start using today to engage with conflict more effectively. By the end, you'll understand how facing conflict isn't about becoming aggressive or confrontational. It's about reclaiming your voice, your boundaries, and your authentic relationships without requiring you to become someone you're not. Let me ground this in research before we go further. This isn't about motivational talk. This is about understanding what science tells us about conflict and human psychology. Communication scholar Michael Roloff has documented how conflict avoidance creates what he calls interpersonal issues that fester. When conflicts remain unresolved and unaddressed, they either explode in dramatic confrontations or result in emotional suppression that damages our mental health. Research from psychologist Brittany Speed and her colleagues at Stony Brook University found that assertiveness training, which teaches people to engage with conflict constructively, leads to significant improvements in depression, anxiety, self-esteem, and relationship satisfaction. Their comprehensive review of decades of research shows that the ability to express ourselves honestly while respecting others isn't just a nice skill. It's foundational to psychological health. Richard Slatcher at the University of Georgia has shown something even more remarkable. His research on couples found that those who resolve disagreements using positive behaviors like humor and affection don't just have better relationships, they have healthier cortisol patterns, which is linked to better overall physical health and potentially increased longevity. The message from neuroscience and psychology is clear. Avoiding conflict doesn't protect you. It quietly erodes your well-being from the inside out. Let's break down exactly how conflict avoidance undermines your freedom. There are 4 distinct ways this pattern operates. First, conflict avoidance forces you to suppress your genuine needs and feelings. Every time you stay silent when something matters to you, you're sending your brain a message. That message says your thoughts, your feelings, and your boundaries don't matter as much as keeping the peace. Over time, this creates what psychologists call learned helplessness. You begin to believe you have no power to change your circumstances. According to research published in the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School, this pattern of suppression can lead to broken relationships, damaged reputations, and strained interactions across all areas of life. Second, conflict avoidance creates emotional distance in your relationships. When you refuse to address issues that bother you, you're not actually preserving the relationship. You're creating a version of it that's less authentic and less intimate. Psychologist Marisa Franco, who studies friendship and relationships, found that people who engage in healthy conflict are more popular, have greater well-being, and experience less depression, anxiety, and loneliness. The opposite is also true. When people avoid conflict, they often choose to distance themselves from others, which damages the very relationships they were trying to protect. Third, unresolved conflict doesn't disappear. It transforms. Research from St. Louis University shows that conflict avoidance leads to increased resentment, passive-aggressive behavior, and what's called emotional leakage. The anger and frustration you suppress in one situation often spills out inappropriately in another. You might snap at your partner over dishes when you're actually upset about work. You might withdraw from friends when you're really frustrated with family dynamics. The energy it takes to contain these emotions exhausts your mental resources. Fourth, conflict avoidance prevents personal growth. Brett Lorson at Florida Atlantic University argues that conflict is actually one of the foundational building blocks of healthy relationships. When managed constructively, conflict helps us develop autonomy, individuation, and improved social skills. Without conflict, we can't test our boundaries, clarify our values, or learn how to negotiate our needs with others. Avoiding conflict might feel safer in the moment, but it keeps us psychologically stuck, unable to develop the emotional maturity that comes from working through disagreements. Each of these mechanisms compounds over time. The more you avoid, the more helpless you feel. The more helpless you feel, the more you avoid. This cycle doesn't lead to peace. It leads to a quiet, suffocating loss of freedom. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why does conflict feel so threatening that we'd rather sacrifice our own needs than face it? The answer lies in how our brains are wired. Your brain doesn't distinguish between physical threats and social threats. When you anticipate a difficult conversation, the same neural systems activate as if you were facing physical danger. The amygdala, your brain's threat detection system, triggers rapidly in response to potential social conflict. This activates your sympathetic nervous system, initiating the fight, flight, or freeze response. Cortisol floods your system. Your heart rate increases, blood flow redirects to your muscles, your mouth goes dry. All of this happens because your brain is treating the upcoming conversation as if it were a life or death situation. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. For our ancestors, social exclusion from the tribe could mean death. Being cast out meant losing access to resources, protection, and mates. Our brains evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to signs of social threat. But here's the problem. That same neural wiring that kept our ancestors alive is now sabotaging our relationships and our freedom. Your prefrontal cortex, which handles rational thinking and decision-making, gets overridden by the emotional brain during perceived threats. This is why it's so hard to think clearly during conflict. Your higher reasoning centers are literally being suppressed by your brain's ancient threat detection systems. There's also a neurochemical dimension to this. When you're in threat mode, your brain releases stress hormones that impair cognitive functions like reasoning, problem solving, and memory retention. These are exactly the skills you need most during difficult conversations. So the moment you need to be most articulate and thoughtful, your brain is actively working against you. Social conditioning compounds these biological responses. Many of us grew up in environments where conflict was either absent or excessive. If you never saw healthy conflict resolution modeled, you literally don't have the neural pathways built for it. Your brain doesn't have a template for what constructive disagreement looks like. Or perhaps you grew up in a home where conflict was explosive and dangerous. In that case, your brain learned early that conflict equals trauma and avoidance equals survival. Cultural factors play a role too. Many cultures emphasize harmony over individual expression. You might have internalized messages that being agreeable is more valuable than being authentic, that rocking the boat is selfish, that your discomfort matters less than others' comfort, these beliefs operate beneath conscious awareness, shaping your behavior automatically. Finally, there's the reinforcement cycle. Every time you avoid conflict and nothing terrible happens immediately, your brain registers that as a success. Avoidance gets reinforced. The anxiety you feel before confrontation gets temporarily relieved when you stay silent. That temporary relief, even though it leads to worse outcomes later, is enough to keep the avoidance pattern going. Understanding these mechanisms doesn't make conflict easier, but it does help you recognize that your fear isn't evidence that conflict is genuinely dangerous. It's evidence that your brain is following ancient programming that no longer serves you in the modern world. So how do you break free from this pattern? How do you start engaging with conflict in a way that builds freedom rather than fear? Here are 6 research-backed strategies you can begin implementing immediately. Strategy 1 is to reframe conflict as information, not threat. Before your next difficult conversation, remind yourself that disagreement reveals important data about the relationship. It shows you where boundaries need clarification, where needs aren't being met, and where growth is possible. Psychologist Marisa Franco emphasizes that healthy conflict brings people closer when approached collaboratively, rather than adversarially. Instead of thinking about winning or losing, think about what you and the other person can learn. Strategy 2 involves practicing with lower stakes situations. Don't wait until you're furious about something major to start speaking up. Begin with small things. If your coffee order is wrong, practice politely asking for it to be fixed. If a friend suggests a restaurant you dislike, express your preference. Research on assertiveness training shows that building this muscle with minor conflicts makes it easier to handle significant ones. Each small success rewires your brain slightly, creating new neural pathways that associate speaking up with positive outcomes rather than danger. Strategy 3 is to separate the person from the problem. When you need to address something, focus on the specific behavior or situation, not the person's character. Instead of saying someone is thoughtless, describe the specific action that bothered you. This technique, supported by decades of conflict resolution research, prevents the other person from becoming defensive. It allows them to hear your concern without feeling attacked. It also helps you stay calm because you're discussing observable facts rather than making judgments about someone's nature. Strategy 4 requires you to own your emotional experience without blame. Use statements that start with your own feelings and needs. Say what you observed, how it affected you, and what you need going forward. This approach, validated by research from the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies, helps you express yourself assertively without aggression. You're not attacking. You're simply sharing your experience. The other person can hear this much more easily than accusations or demands. Strategy 5 involves preparing for the physical response. Since your body will react to conflict as a threat, develop techniques to calm your nervous system. Practice deep breathing before difficult conversations. During the conversation, notice when you're becoming activated. Pause if you need to. It's completely acceptable to say you need a moment to collect your thoughts. Research shows that managing your physiological response allows your prefrontal cortex to stay online, giving you access to your full cognitive abilities. Strategy 6 is perhaps the most important. Be willing to hear the other person's perspective and acknowledge your part in the situation. Healthy conflict isn't about proving you're right. It's about mutual understanding. If someone points out how you contributed to the problem and it's valid, own it. Apologize if appropriate. This doesn't mean backing down from your concerns. It means recognizing that most conflicts involve complexity on both sides. Psychologist Marisa Franco calls this reciprocity. When you approach someone with respect and willingness to own your part, they're much more likely to respond the same way. Let me add 2 more advanced strategies for those ready to go deeper. Strategy 7 is setting clear boundaries about how conflict should happen. You can tell someone you want to discuss something difficult, and you can request that you both stay calm and respectful. You can even say what you're afraid might happen and ask for reassurance. This meta-communication, talking about how you are going to talk, helps create safety for both people. Strategy 8 involves building what researchers call conflict self-efficacy. This is your belief in your ability to handle disagreements. Start noticing when you successfully navigate difficult conversations, even small ones. Celebrate these wins internally. Keep a record if it helps. Over time, you'll build evidence that conflict doesn't destroy you or your relationships. This evidence gradually overrides the fear-based programming in your brain. Remember, none of these strategies require you to become someone different. You don't need to be loud or aggressive or confrontational. Assertiveness, as research shows, is about expressing yourself respectfully while also respecting others. It's not about domination. It's about honest communication. It's about claiming your right to have needs, opinions, and boundaries without apologizing for your existence. Freedom isn't the absence of conflict. Freedom is the ability to speak your truth, set your boundaries, and maintain your integrity even when it's uncomfortable. Every time you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you're trading authentic freedom for the illusion of safety. The research is clear. People who learn to engage with conflict constructively don't just have better relationships, they have better mental health, better physical health, and greater overall life satisfaction. They're not more aggressive or difficult. They're simply more honest, more connected, and more fully themselves. This doesn't mean seeking out conflict or being combative. It means no longer sacrificing your voice to avoid discomfort. It means recognizing that disagreement is a normal, necessary part of any genuine relationship. It means trusting yourself enough to believe that your perspective matters, even when others disagree. The path forward starts with one small step. One moment where you choose honest discomfort over false peace. One conversation where you say what you actually think instead of what you believe others want to hear. One boundary you set, even though it might disappoint someone. Here are 3 questions to sit with. Where in your life right now are you staying silent when you need to speak? What would change if you believed that your voice, your needs, and your boundaries were just as important as maintaining harmony? And what might freedom actually feel like if you stopped being afraid of conflict? The choice, as always, is yours. But remember, the cost of silence compounds. The freedom you gain from honest communication expands. Which future are you building with today's choices?